Hey there, it's Kayla. In the past, I have talked about my love of Brandon Sanderson a lot. We'll just say a lot. And I wanted to film a video about why I loved him so much. So, without further ado, let's start talking about it. So when I initially began researching epic fantasy books, the name Brandon Sanderson popped up all the time in forums and all kinds of things. I was just basically reading, I had just finished reading the Kingkiller Chronicles and Game of Thrones, and I was looking for an epic fantasy author or series that I could dive back into. And so I started looking up Brandon Sanderson, and the sheer number of books that he'd put out was not only overwhelming, but also it put me off of him, because I thought there's just no way that somebody who has published this many books at this frequency could be putting out quality, you know? The two things don't jive in my mind. Like, someone who pushes books out so often, there's no way they're all good, right? It seems like there'd be something mediocre in there. You would just think there would be more flaws. Okay, so to put it into perspective, he is 44 years old, and to date he's written about 23 books, with his first one being published in 2005. It's 2020. That's 15 years. That's a lot of books. That is a lot of freaking books to put out in that amount of time. Now, granted, he'd written, I want to say, like 10 books before he was ever published. So like after Allomancy, which is his first book, was published, he had other books in the works that were already written, like the Mistborn trilogy. I believe those are the next books that he ended up publishing right after that. So he did have other things that were ready to go. But the fact that he had all these books ready to go, and like from then until now, he has consistently been putting out quality work for years, consistently. So I was actually given the opportunity to meet Brandon Sanderson here in Alaska. He actually visited here on the Skyward book tour, and I was able to go. I was one of the first few, not first, but I was one of there were the first 50 people actually got to sit in the Q&A. I was like one person behind that. I was like 51 or 2, so I was at the front of the line, so I was still standing right there and able to listen entirely to the Q&A. So at the book talk that went on before the signing, he discussed why he consistently put out this type of work and how often, and why he works so hard to do this. And what it ended up boiling down to is that he said he felt indebted to his fans, that his dream was to be an author. It was always his dream, and because of his fans, that is what he's able to do. Like, his dream came true. And so to repay the people who have given him basically his career, he feels like he needs to consistently write and consistently put things out and meet deadlines and do things that make his fans happy. And man, if that is not a refreshing take on authors. Oh my gosh, there's a hair in my eyeball. What? Oh, that was, you know that feeling? Oh my god. It was like, I was almost claustrophobic. I was like, ah, get out of there, man. He also talked about being chosen to finish the Wheel of Time series. If you don't know, the Wheel of Time, it is a large fantasy series that was written by Robert Jordon. Robert Jordon died in 2007, and he wrote down his plans while he was in the hospital, just like a detailed plan of how he wanted his book series to end, because he didn't want to leave it unfinished. It's a huge series. I want to say it's 13 or 14 books, and he didn't want to die and leave his fans without the last book. So he left the job to his wife to find an author to finish the series in his place. And Brandon Sanderson was heavily influenced by Robert Jordon. He talks about how much he loved the Wheel of Time, and how reading it when he was growing up really changed his outlook on fantasy. The story is very heavily influenced by The Lord of the Rings, but instead of an entirely male cast that is basically in the Fellowship, there's a number of women. And so he said that seeing women in roles that are usually played by old white men made him look at things differently, and it influenced him in how he writes now, how he likes to take a trope and then invert it. Like, you know, the chosen one trope, but what if the chosen one doesn't win? Or What if the wise old man is actually a wise young woman instead? So Brandon Sanderson ended up writing a eulogy for Robert Jordon discussing this, and the influence that he had, and how his love for the series. So Robert Jordon's widow, Harriet, who was also his editor, read Brandon Sanderson's eulogy to her late husband, and she was so moved and so touched by it that she ended up reaching out to Brandon Sanderson to finish the series. One of his favorite book series. He's asked to finish it, and literally that is one of those times when like it gives me goosebumps just saying it. That's such, can you imagine like being handed the reins to something that you've loved for so long, and then knowing, oh my gosh, it makes my heart so happy for him, to have him have been so successful that he was, and be so passionate to be selected to do something like that. And it's such a huge series. And so he ended up, Robert Jordon wanted the series to be finished. He believed that it could be finished in one book, but Brandon Sanderson did not. He, I believe, finished it in two. And if you actually go through and look at the ratings of these books, I know that books, I want to say 8, 9, and 10, people believe are very hard to get through in the Wheel of Time. But I believe the last book that Robert Jordon wrote himself is where he kind of fell back into his own groove and went back to the roots of how the story in his writing began. And he ended on a strong note. And where Brandon Sanderson picked up, he was met with really high praise. The ratings are really high. I actually think when I looked it up, they're the highest rated of all of the books. Not to take away anything from Robert Jordon, but this is about Brandon Sanderson, which is why I'm discussing it. And I am reading The Wheel of Time right now. I'm a little over halfway through the first book, The Eye of the World. But Robert Jordon's writing is very descriptive and very intriguing. I personally have really liked it. And obviously this is the first book. I can see the homage to Lord of the Rings. I can understand people not really wanting that, or like maybe not liking it because it seems so familiar, but that was sort of his goal, was to introduce you to fantasy in a familiar way and then take a hard right and go in a completely different direction, but sort of just like easing you into what his world is going to be. He also goes to BYU and does guest lectures and teaches classes on writing sci-fi fantasy. You know, he's so successful. He obviously doesn't have to do that. And I think it's just speaks to his character that he takes the time to help other people do something and achieve their dreams like he did. He talks about how much it helped him and how the connections that he made and the things that he learned in those classes really helped him become a better writer and gave him the connections that he needed to make to meet the editor that ended up publishing Elantris. So, and these lectures are also posted on YouTube. So, I mean, you can go right now onto his, I will link a few of them in the description box as well. You can go and watch them. And they're so good. He's a really wonderful speaker. I feel like he really connects with people by using, you know, pop culture and stuff like that, that recognizable things. But even though I'm not a writer, I still watch them because I feel like I become a better reader by learning how the writing process works, and like I'm able to see things that he does that make me happy in writing, and I like knowing that those things are deliberate. So those are all the emotional reasons that I love Brandon, but those aren't the reasons I fell in love with him. Those are things that I researched after I started reading his writing. The things that to me stand out the most about Brandon Sanderson is his character work, his magic systems, and honestly his religions, the way he works religion into his plots. I love Kaladin in the Stormlight Archives, and Dalinar. I really love Vin and Elend and Sazed from the Mistborn trilogy. I like Spensa and Embot in the Skyward books. I'm not going to go into full depth of why I really love these characters. Kaladin's story arc is one of my favorites, specifically in Way of Kings. He goes through a lot of things emotionally. He goes through depression. He goes through stages of grief. He struggles to exist. He's a very real, flawed character. I love him. He's actually one of my favorites. I also love Sazed, who is in the Mistborn trilogy, and he also goes through questions about his spirituality and whether or not what he's doing is a waste of time. Is faith a waste of time? It's a whole... He goes from being this character who's so positive to somebody who is just questioning everything. And I think that's one of the reasons I really loved his character, because he does seem like he has so much faith. So to see a character who has so much faith in religions question, his choices in life because of a tragedy that has struck him, you just see all these different stages of him. He's a different person. And I know some people feel like he is whiny, or they don't actually like reading his parts then. And that, that is what it is. I can understand that, but I really love the development of him. I think it's important to see him struggle. Okay. Magic systems. Jesus Christ. Magic systems. Brando Sanderson is just... he is untouchable to me in this area. My favorite for sure is Allomancy in the Mistborn trilogy. Allomancy is a type of magic where the user has to have the ability to start with. So an Allomancer has to be born with the power to be an Allomancer. And in order to use their power, they have to consume an amount of a metal. So different metals that they consume can do different things, and most commonly an Allomancer can only utilize one allomantic metal. So like tin increases your senses, so a tin eye can see really far or hear really well, and just their feelings are increased. But then there's also like a bad part to that. So like if you're in a fight and you get stabbed and you are burning tin, you're gonna feel your pain a lot sharper. So there's downfalls to it too, but a Mistborn can use all of the allomantic ones. So to see how Brando Sanderson utilizes this specific type of magic and being able to push or pull on different metals, and the way they fly through the streets by throwing a coin down and then pushing off the coin, not being able to pull on something that weighs less than you, because if you do, the thing that weighs less than you will come to you. So when they want to pull themselves towards something, it has to be something that weighs more than them so that they get pulled to it. You know what I mean? Like you can't just, there's limits and rules, and which is one of the reasons I really love his magic systems, because they're limited. It's like logic and magic combined. It's really interesting. The fight scenes with it are impeccable, super easy to read, super easy to visualize. I just love it. And then the Stormlight Archives. I can't even describe how these work, because Stormlight magic is just, I don't even understand it yet. I was actually watching one of Brando Sanderson's lectures at BYU, which is his alma mater. But he discusses how he writes magic systems, and he refers to what he does as a rule-based magic. Basically, he writes magic in a way so that way there's rules and limits, and it is also kind of used as a tool, as opposed to just like a mystical thing that you don't understand. He talks about how the flaws in a person and in the magic system are more interesting than the magic itself. So like, what can't it do? Like, you can have all these powers, but what can't it do? So Brando Sanderson is religious. He obviously enjoys creating religions for his worlds. But one of the things I appreciate is that he doesn't just write things to push like an agenda. Like some people, I don't know, I feel like it can go a couple of different ways when you write religion. The characters that he writes like question religions, like, and there's multiple ones, like a lot, pretty much in all of his books there's more than one religion. In Mistborn there's like thousands basically, but specifically in the Stormlight Archives there's a character named Yasna who is an atheist and looked at as a heretic because she doesn't believe in God, and she's not like a character. She's a wonderful character. She's intelligent. She's a scholar. She's powerful. And that's one of the things that's so great about it is she's not looked down on for not being religious. So he writes these characters that question religions or are agnostic. And he doesn't make these choices affect them negatively. And he also doesn't make it seem like they have to be enlightened in order to be a better person. He just lets them believe what they believe, and he, I appreciate that. He also tackles a lot of mental health issues, depression and PTSD and, grief. He goes into heavily, his characters go through things emotionally, and it's not just like an easily overcome obstacle. Their mental health holds a lot of the characters back, just like a normal person, and I appreciate that. Like, a lot of characters in fantasy go through it, and I appreciate that he shows the difficulties that mental health can cause somebody, making things that might seem simple or easy really difficult just because you're being held back by your own emotions and thoughts. So there's actually different eras of the Mistborn trilogy, and one of the things that I think is pretty awesome about this specifically is that Brandon Sanderson thought that it would be interesting to see the progression of a world. So the first era of Mistborn is more medieval, and then the second era is like 1,000 years in the future. So you see how the world has progressed. So how the religions in the first Mistborn trilogy developed, and how the world that is left in the first era grows in the second. And so it's pretty awesome to see how culturally things change and how the things that happened in the first era affected the world in the future. And so I actually don't really care for the second era Mistborn books myself. They're okay. They're definitely not my favorite. There's parts of them that I like. There's some characters that I think are fun. But it's more like, I don't know, almost like steampunk Western fantasy. It's strange. It's really not for me, but I can appreciate the books. And the development of the magic system and how things kind of change as far as that goes as well. I was actually watching another booktuber, Daniel Greene. I will link his channel in the comments. He's one of my favorites. He's absolutely fantastic. And you should definitely go follow him. But he talked about how Skyward and Starsight have been speculated to be kind of like a warm-up for 3rd gen Mistborn. So like basically sci-fi fantasy, but legitimately the sci-fi version of a fantasy world. So what it would be like in the future, like the real future, like super future. And I think that is just freaking next level. You know what I mean? Who thinks of these kind of things? Like, how is it going to change? How is magic going to go in space? Like, magic in space? Is that a thing? I don't know. If there's a magical space sci-fi saga that I need to know about, please let me know. Because I feel like usually sci-fi obviously usually has a lot more science and aliens and, biological technology and weapons and that type of thing. And it's not usually like a magic system in space. And I think that's so cool, and I really cannot wait. I really hope that's a thing. I would just... I'd freak out. So yeah, that is my ode to Brandon Sanderson, essentially. I just can't get enough of him. I can't speak highly enough of him, and I will push anyone to read his books. I'm gonna be honest. I just love him. So that's that. Stay tuned. There'll be more to come.